How do hundreds of millions of people in China make it through brutal winters without relying on gas or constant electricity? From cave homes carved into mountainsides to walls warmed by kitchen stoves, China developed winter strategies unlike anything else on Earth. In this video, you will see how resourcefulness, tradition, and clever engineering kept families alive when the cold closed in. In the bitter winters of northern China, people learned to survive using the earth itself as shelter. The yaodong, or cave dwelling carved into low-S cliffs, became one of the most effective heating solutions ever created without gas or electricity. The design used thick soil walls to block wind, trap warmth, and maintain a steady indoor temperature even when snowstorms raged outside. The low-S plateau is soft enough to carve but firm enough to hold shape. Families dug deep arches into hillsides, forming warm interior chambers protected on all sides. The ground absorbed sunlight during the day, then released it slowly through the night. This natural insulation allowed rooms to stay warm with minimal fuel. In many regions, the interior remained stable at around 10 to 15 degrees Celsius, despite temperatures outside falling far below freezing. Inside, surfaces were plastered with clay or lime to prevent crumbling and improve heat retention. Raised brick platforms, often used as beds, stored warmth from small stoves or heated floors. A single fire could heat the entire room because the structure held thermal energy so well. Unlike wooden houses that leaked heat through walls and roofs, yaodong created secure chambers that needed little upkeep once built. Ventilation shafts carried smoke away while allowing airflow. Door openings were kept small to reduce heat loss. Families arranged their living spaces deep inside the carved rooms, where temperature remained most stable. Even livestock sometimes rested in adjoining chambers to add extra warmth. These homes were simple, quiet, and extremely efficient. Modern homes may use concrete and glass, but many rural families still live in yaodong because nothing else provides such reliable warmth for so little cost. The method shows how early Chinese communities shaped architecture around climate instead of fighting it. They worked with the land, not against it, and created winter shelters that still outperform many modern buildings in energy efficiency. The more you study these dwellings, the more obvious it becomes that they were engineering masterpieces disguised as humble homes. But underground living is only the beginning. Another traditional method took warmth and spread it through the walls themselves, creating a home that radiated heat from the inside out. The north wind presses hard against the walls of an old Chinese home. It moans through the alleys, rattles the rooftops, and sweeps ice across the ground. Yet inside, the air stays strangely calm. Light filters through window frames that hold 2 layers of glass or paper, creating a quiet shield between the family and the winter outside. This is the Chuanghu, the double-layer window, a silent guardian that has sheltered generations from the bitter north wind. Centuries ago, before glass became common, people learned to stretch oiled paper across wooden grids, forming the first protective layer. As winters grew harsher, households added a second frame a few inches inside the first. The space between these layers trapped air, turning it into a natural insulator. Warmth remained inside. Wind remained outside. A thin barrier of still air became a powerful defender against freezing nights. Its secret lies in patience rather than force. The window does not fight the winter. It slows it. The cold hits the outer layer, weakens across the trapped air, and reaches the inner panel with little strength left. Rooms that once filled with drafts became steady and livable. The family could cook, read, and sleep without the constant bite of wind against their skin. Over time, materials changed. Paper was replaced with glass, wood frames with sturdier joints, seals with strips of cloth or paste, yet the principle never shifted. Villagers in Hebei and Shandong still remember elders pressing cotton into the gaps to strengthen insulation, their fingers quick and practiced. Children helped by smoothing flour paste along the edges, sealing the window like a ritual before New Year. Double-layer windows shaped daily life as much as the Kong stove beside them. They softened the morning frost, kept ink from freezing on a scholar's brush, and protected infants sleeping under cotton quilts. In poor villages, even a simple sheet of oiled paper added in winters made a difference between a room that trembled with drafts and one that held a fragile warmth. And just as these windows guarded families through the coldest months, another quiet invention spread warmth through entire walls, turning architecture itself into a living furnace waiting to be rediscovered. In villages where winter presses against every doorframe and the sun feels thin as paper, the Chinese found a way to make even their walls breathe warmth. Imagine a home where the heat from a single stove does far more than cook the family's meals. It travels through hidden channels inside the walls, turning cold brick into a slow, steady source of comfort. This is the Nuanqiang, the warm wall, a quiet masterpiece of ancient engineering. The idea emerged in villages where fuel was scarce and cold was relentless. People needed more than a fire. They needed heat that lingered long after the flames died down. So craftsmen connected kitchen stoves and hearths to hollow channels built inside thick clay or brick walls. As the fire burned, hot smoke and air moved through these hidden passages, heating the wall from the inside out before drifting toward a chimney. The secret of the warm wall lay in the earth. Clay and brick absorb heat slowly, then release it steadily for hours. Even after cooking was finished and the household fell quiet, the walls continued to radiate gentle warmth, turning sleeping areas into safe havens against the night frost. Families placed their beds beside these walls, knowing they would hold the fire's memory until dawn. The Nuanqiang also shaped culture. Children studied by the warmest spot. Elders rested with their backs against it. Mothers dried herbs along its surface, knowing heat would seep through gently. It was architecture infused with care, a reminder that survival depended not on strength alone, but on wisdom passed from hand to hand. Today, traces of the warm wall remain in rural homes and modern, radiant heating systems. The principle endures. Use the fire you already have. Hold warmth in the earth. Let the home itself breathe heat. And just beyond the glow of the warm wall, another winter strategy awaited, soft, layered, and crafted to seal the cold out before it ever touched the skin. In the deep winters of northern China, when the frost grips roofs like iron and the air turns sharp enough to sting the lungs, survival often depends on what the walls can hold. Long before synthetic insulation existed, families learned to build warmth layer by layer, weaving fibers, grasses, and cloth into quiet shields against the cold. It was simple work, but it held the power to decide whether a home felt alive or hollow. The secret grew from observation. Farmers noticed how straw kept livestock warm through the coldest nights. They saw how layers of hemp or cotton trapped air, creating pockets of heat that did not fade quickly. So they borrowed the logic of nature. They pressed straw mats between wooden frames. They stuffed walls with reeds, husks, and felted scraps. They stretched thick cloth across windows and doorways, turning every surface into a patient barrier. Inside these homes, the warmth felt different. It did not glow like fire or radiate like stone. Instead, it settled slowly. The layered fibers absorbed heat from cooking, conversation, and the bodies of those gathered inside. Once warmed, the walls released that stored heat with steady calm. Even after the hearth dimmed, the house remained gentle, as if it breathed warmth back into the night. In remote villages, some homes still follow this tradition. Modern insulation may be stronger, but the old ways carry a quiet wisdom. They remind us that warmth is something built slowly, with patience and intention. And as the wind presses against the eaves and snow gathers outside, the layered walls hold firm, guarding the heat like a promise. Now that the walls are warm, another question rises. How did the Chinese keep their bodies warm when even the thickest quilts faltered? When winter settles over the northern countryside of Heilongjiang and the air turns thin and metallic with cold, the first defense is not a stove or a fire. It is the quilt. For centuries, families survived bitter nights by mastering the art of layering cotton and cloth into warmth, dense enough to push back the frost. This is the mianbei, the winter heart of the Chinese home. The secret begins with material. Cotton, once scarce and precious, was washed, fluffed, and beaten until it formed a cloud-like mass. Women layered it by hand between lengths of cloth, stitching it with long, looping threads that held the cotton in place without crushing it. Each quilt was more than bedding. It was craft, care, and survival woven into one. A single quilt was rarely enough. Families stacked 2 or 3 together, letting air pockets trap heat between layers. The weight pressed gently across the body, sealing warmth so effectively that even unheated rooms could remain survivable. Children slept wrapped like cocoons, their breath rising in small puffs against the cold air. Color and symbolism were part of the tradition: red quilts for weddings, pale blue or white for newborns. Older quilts repaired again and again until they grew soft from generations of use. Every stitch held memory. Every layer reflected the hands that built it. At night, families gathered on kang beds or warm floors under piles of quilts, sharing body heat as much as fabric heat. The room might be freezing, but beneath the blankets, life felt calm and safe. Outside, wind rattled the windows. Inside, cotton and cloth turned the darkness into shelter. Even today, thick quilts remain common in rural homes. Modern fibers and machine stitching have changed their appearance, but not their purpose. When heaters fail or storms cut the power, the old wisdom returns. Layer the quilts. Trap the warmth. Sleep through the cold with patience and stillness. And beyond those heavy blankets, another winter craft waited in the shadows, one that warmed scholars, steadied calligraphy brushes, and kept ink alive when frost tried to steal its flow. In the deep winters of Shanxi, where frost crawls across clay rooftops and the morning air bites like iron, even the smallest tasks become battles against the cold. For scholars, poets, and calligraphers, the struggle began before the first brushstroke. Ink would stiffen, water would freeze, hands would tremble in the unheated rooms of old courtyard homes. To keep the written word alive, they turned to a quiet art known as wenyan, the warming of the inkstone. An inkstone is the heart of Chinese calligraphy. Without it, ink cannot form. But in winter, the stone grows icy, refusing to grind the ink stick into liquid. So scholars learned to warm it gently, using the same patience they brought to their writing. Some placed the inkstone near a brazier until the chill left its surface. Others wrapped it in cloth heated by embers or rested it beside a small pot of simmering water. The goal was steady warmth, never heat, since excess could crack the stone and ruin years of craftsmanship. The process became a ritual. A scholar would rise at dawn, set a clay brazier on the floor, and place the inkstone close enough to gather warmth but not scorch. Fingers tested the temperature with care. When the stone reached a mild glow, the ink stick touched it, leaving the first soft streak of black. Brush and breath aligned. The room remained cold, yet the ink flowed as if protected by an unseen hand. Wenyan carried meaning beyond practicality. It symbolized devotion to learning in a climate that challenged every stroke. It taught discipline in a world where comfort was rare. In the quiet hours before sunrise, a warmed inkstone became a source of calm, a reminder that knowledge endured even when winter pressed hard against the walls. And when the scholar finally lifted the brush, the warmth beneath the ink felt like a small victory over the season itself. In the frozen borderlands of Manchuria, where winds sweep down from Siberia and cut through villages like knives, survival begins with what you wear. Before padded jackets or synthetic fibers, the people of the Northeast relied on one garment above all others. The fur-lined coat was their shield against a winter that could take lives in a single night. The piao's strength came from careful construction. Hunters and herders selected hides from sheep, goats, or foxes, choosing skins thick enough to hold heat but soft enough to move with the body. The fur always faced inward, creating a pocket of insulated air that trapped warmth close to the skin. The outer surface was treated to resist wind and moisture, forming a shield against freezing storms. Every seam mattered. Every stitch prevented heat from escaping. Families tailored each coat according to need. Herdsmen wore long, heavy versions that reached the ankles, giving full-body warmth during long rides across open plains. Children wore lighter, shorter coats that allowed them to run and help with chores. Linings were often patched from older garments, layering new fur over worn cloth to strengthen warmth without waste. Nothing was discarded if it could still give heat. To wear a piao was to carry the memory of the animal that once braved the same landscape. The coat warmed the back, the chest, and even the breath, since the high collar shielded the throat from cutting winds. When riders leaned into their saddles, the fur trapped their body heat and softened the cold metal beneath them. Inside homes, people often kept their piao on through most of the day. Fires were small, fuel was limited, and warmth depended on layering rather than heating entire rooms. At night, the coats doubled as blankets, spread across bedding to keep families safe until morning. Even now, in isolated settlements and herding communities, the piao remains a winter companion. Modern fabrics may have arrived, but few match the quiet endurance of a well-made fur coat. It carries history, craftsmanship, and the oldest understanding of warmth. Keep heat close, and the cold will pass. In the frozen winters of Gansu's old courtyard towns, the air outside could turn laundry into stiff boards of ice before it even dried. Families learned quickly that surviving winter meant finding sunlight wherever it hid. So they brought the sun indoors. Windows, balconies, and even door frames became drying racks, capturing every stray beam of winter light. This was indoor sun drying, a practice that blended necessity, patience, and the quiet hope that warmth would eventually return. The method relied on three things: sunlight, airflow, and time. Homes were arranged to catch as much southern light as possible, and during winter, laundry lines were strung across inner rooms where the sun fell for a few precious hours. Cotton shirts, children's trousers, heavy winter socks, and padded jackets hung like small flags above warm, brick floors or near slow-burning stoves. Moisture lifted little by little, as if coaxed upward by the pale winter sun. It was more than drying. It was protection. Wet clothes in freezing air were dangerous. They invited frostbite, sickness, and deep chills that lingered through the night. Indoors, the garments dried safely, absorbing the gentle heat trapped within thick walls or drifting from a small stove in the kitchen. Families developed rhythms around the practice. Early morning washing when the air was clear, midday turning of garments to catch the shifting light, evening folding while the last warmth of the day clung to the fabric. The scent of sun-dried cloth filled the home, warm and faintly sweet, a reminder that even winter had moments of generosity. Some rooms grew crowded with drying lines, but no one complained. Each piece of clothing represented one more barrier against the cold, one more day of safety. Yet as the sun moved across the roof beams and the shadows shifted, another lesson of winter waited close by. Survival was not only found in fabric and sunlight. Sometimes warmth came from what people drank, not what they wore. When winter descends on the narrow alleyways of Old Harbin and the wind slices through the streets like a blade, you have to wonder, what single barrier stood between a family and the cold that hunted every doorway? It was the Menlian, the winter windscreen. Hung over doors from Manchuria to Inner Mongolia, the Min Lion was the simplest shield imaginable. A curtain of quilted fabric or layered felt, stitched thick enough to block the wind, heavy enough to stay still, and long enough to brush the floor. In homes built with thin wooden frames and brick courtyards that trapped cold instead of heat, this curtain became the difference between warmth and suffering. Its power came from separation. The Min Lian created a pocket of still air between the door and the room, stopping drafts before they could snake across the floor. Even a small change in airflow meant survival in regions where a single open door sent icy gusts rushing through the house. Mothers sewed these curtains from scraps of cotton, hemp, or old bedding. Wealthier families used brocade or wool, sometimes embroidered with protective symbols meant to guard the household. Every winter, new layers were added to old ones until the curtain grew thick and soft like armor. A good Min Lian did more than block wind. It kept in heat from the kang bed, the stove room, or shared body warmth at night. Children pulled it aside and darted through with laughter, while elders let it fall slowly to hold back the cold. It became a silent guardian, working without fire, without fuel, without noise. Even today, rural homes still hang Min Lian when heaters fail or storms cut the power. The old wisdom remains: stop the wind, trap the warmth, let the house breathe gently. And beyond that heavy curtain waited another winter habit, one that warmed bodies from the inside and kept spirits alive when nights turned cruel. Are you ready for it? On a frozen morning in rural Gansu, when the cold settles into the bones of the house and the walls breathe mist, one question rises with the smoke from every courtyard. How do you keep warm before the fire reaches the Kong and before the quilts have gathered the night's stored heat? The answer begins in the kitchen. It begins with cooking itself. For centuries, families survived winter by turning every meal into a source of heat. The moment someone struck a spark to the stove, warmth spread through the room and into the walls. This daily ritual did more than prepare food. It drove back the cold, one breath of fire at a time. The routine always started early. Rice had to steam, porridge had to boil, dough had to rise beside the warm clay. Each movement stirred heat into the air. The wok hissed, the pot rattled, and the stove exhaled warmth that drifted into every corner of the home. Even before eating, people gathered near the hearth, letting the rising steam thaw stiff fingers. The secret behind this method was efficiency. A single fire performed many tasks. It cooked breakfast, boiled water for tea, heated the air, and fed hidden flues that warmed walls and floors. Nothing was wasted. The flames that browned dumplings also softened the cold iron doors. The embers that simmered soup kept the kitchen livable. During harsher winters, families extended cooking throughout the day. Stews simmered for hours. Kettles stayed full. Tea water never cooled. Each small pot acted like a lantern of heat, pushing back the freeze with patient consistency. This routine shaped winter life. Children studied by the stove. Elders rested on low stools close to the fire. Families lingered after meals, letting the last warmth cling to their clothes before stepping away. And just when the flames began to settle and the room dimmed, another kind of winter strength waited to rise. It came in a cup, rich and burning, warming the body from within. Winter in the old towns of Shanxi could grip the body from the inside out. Cold seeped through walls, stiffened fingers, and settled deep in the bones. When stoves were weak and fuel was limited, families turned to something far more ancient than fire. They warmed themselves from within. This was the art of rizhou, hot wine, a quiet remedy shaped by centuries of winter hardship. The method was simple but deliberate. A clay pot or small brass kettle was filled with millet wine or rice wine, then set near the edge of the stove where the heat rose gently. The wine warmed slowly, never boiled until steam curled from the spout. Sometimes ginger slices were added, sometimes jujubes or goji berries. Each household had its own blend, its own small philosophy of comfort. The effect was immediate. One cup sent heat spreading through the chest, then the limbs, then the fingertips. Another softened the tension in the shoulders and eased the breath. Farmers drank it before dawn to face the cold fields. Elders sipped it at night to steady their circulation. Travelers carried small gourds of warmed wine to fight mountain winds. It was medicine, nourishment, and courage in liquid form. In northern villages, rizhou became part of winter gatherings. People huddled around low tables, their faces flushed from warmth and laughter as kettles simmered beside them. The cold pressed hard outside, but inside, the fragrance of fermented grain filled the room like a second fire. Even during harsh snowstorms, the ritual continued. As long as the stove could warm a pot, spirits stayed high. Across mountains and frozen plains, the Chinese learned to stay warm with ingenuity shaped by hardship. Every method carries memory, purpose, and survival. Yet these are only fragments of a much larger story. If this glimpse has stirred your curiosity, wait until you see how they heated their homes with no gas and no electricity at all.